mean, in essence, the advance approval is coming with a whole lot of parameters that have to be met to give that, to come with the authority.
Chair, we're back.
Okay, we're back live. All right, here we go. We're going to, Tia's gonna give us a little rundown of the lease agreement. Okay, go right ahead.
Okay, so I'm waiting for the invite, but I'll just start talking about what you have in front of you. So this is draft 3.1, draft 2.1 are the changes that are highlighted in yellow. That's the changes from what you saw yesterday to this morning. And then the two things that are highlighted in gray reflect changes that you requested this morning. So the structure is still similar to the original language. Subsection A is what is authorizing the Agency of Transportation to solicit proposals for purchase or lease, and or lease is in addition to what was there previously. Of the Caledonia County State Airport located in the town of Linden. And then your addition from this morning is that the agency is required to consult with the town of Linden or lease of the airport. Subsection B then is what gives the agency the authority to sell or lease the airport without coming back to the General Assembly. And that now has additional conditions in it, in addition to saying that it can be the terms of the purchase and sale agreement or through a long-term lease. So then any such conveyance shall, and these are your 4 requirements now, include assignment of any of the interests, easements, etc. And it requires that any leases that are in effect at the time of the conveyance, so that would be the purchase or the sale, are fully honored for the balance of the lease term. Requirement 2, this is going to be that the either lease or the purchase and sale agreement requires that there are investments in the airport to address current deficiencies and necessary repairs. Subdivision 3, this is the one that's split from this morning. So subdivision 3 is now ensuring that they're
I don't know what's happening with the screen, but we're having.
Oh, I'm trying to get it up. Well, also talking. So I'll just pause and put it up then. Mike, has it been posted?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. There we go. So subdivision 3, this is the one that's split. So this part now just addresses public use and the public continuing to have access to the airport for general aviation uses. Addition is in perpetuity. And then subdivision 4 is addressing inclusion in the NPIAS, the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems, until at least 2050, arbitrary date that I pulled out of nowhere, subject to federal determination, since that's something that the Federal Aviation Administration.
Do we know it can be done by 2050, or
that it can continue? So they're on it, it's on it currently.
Right, but the subject to federal determination is.
I think it's a 2-year thing. So like every 2 years they come out with a new.
So they could end it 2 years from now.
Yeah, but I will say that I looked at the list yesterday, and there are 2 privately owned airports in Vermont that are on the list. I don't see it becoming less of a referral airport. If anything, maybe it would become more of a referral airport.
Yeah, okay.
So it could be at least and then beyond.
Right.
Yeah.
However.
Okay, so subsection D, you were talking about reasonable offers yesterday. All of this is new. Instead of using reasonable offer language, one of the things that I was emailing back and forth with the agency yesterday is there's language in Title 19 that already requires the sale and lease of property to be at fair market value. It's not defined. Agency of Transportation property. I'm just talking about in Title 19. There's also language about that in Title 29 for like the property that BGS sells. But so for purposes of Title 19, 19 VSA section 10K(b), and I can put this language up if you want to see it, says sales should be for fair market value unless it's to a municipality, in which case there's a little bit of wiggle room, and 26AA talks about leases being at fair market value. And that one's sort of defined. It talks about how, like, in relation to similar properties.
Does it refer back to the definition of fair market value like that we use in other parts of the statute.
There is not a definition of fair market value in Title 19. My understanding is that would be something, I learned this morning, from the agency, that would be incorporated into like a definition of terms that's as part of the appraisal.
The other question that's come up is the extent to which the sale of something of this magnitude, how that aligns with BGS and a sale of a major piece of property. It seems like what we're doing is saying, these are the conditions under which we will authorize it. We're giving you authority to move forward with the sale. But the question is, are we creating a precedent here? And does that align with what BGS has for authority to sell property with prescribed conditions being met, outlined maybe in a capital bill or something?
So I will say that in looking at the three, and I only looked at the as passed the House version, and looking at the three authorizations that are in the capital bill this year, they do not have as many parameters associated with them. In looking at the 2010 act that authorized the sale of the Boylan State Airport, that had much more restrictive terms associated with it. In terms of,
But allowed them to proceed.
yes,
Okay. And negotiate the sale without coming back.
yes. But that was specifically limited to only 2 potential buyers, and it was repealed 1 year later. I don't know why. I can send that out.
I'm very intrigued to know more about
The
what we're.
person, I know some about that. I actually talked about it last night. And what happened up there was that the 2 buyers that were authorized to negotiate with the state to purchase that airport decided not to move forward.
Reasons why?
They were trying, what they were,
Grass strip.
well, what they were trying, they weren't buying it for an airport. They were actually going to put in a wood pellet manufacturing. And they were going to use the airport grounds for storage of lumber and logs and all of that. They didn't have any place to do that. So they were buying the properties for a business venture that never occurred. It was never going to be an airport, a state airport again. It was never going to be used as an airport. It's not like what we're doing here, where we're asking them or telling them, I guess, and that it will be for a public use airport along with private ownership. That was going to just get rid of the asset completely, never to be an airport again, owned by the state, unless the state had decided that that's what they wanted to do.
I'd love to see what those conditions were that was in that outline. I don't know how to find that.
I can send it to you. Okay, so referencing the fair market value and fair market rent pieces in existing statute. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to say was, for purposes of BGS, setting aside the fact that this is generally consistent with the practice that is taken in the capital bill, where they're given authorization to seek purchasers without there being a purchaser identified. The airport property, my understanding is it was acquired under Title V, Part 2, which deals with aeronautics, which means that it's under the jurisdiction of the Agency of Transportation. So it would never be BGS that was selling it. That those 2 acts for the Boylan Airport, well, they did originate in Senate institutions as the committee that introduced the bills. It did not authorize BGS to do anything with authority to the Agency of Transportation.
But if you could go back and look at the language in the capital bill that authorized the sale of St. Albans building. What we're trying to do is give comfort that in fact, this authorization to sell with articulated parameters is not a precedent setting or hasn't been the practice that's been used when we have authorized the sale of other significant state assets. And then so that's, I think, is just a
We're following the existing.
kind of going back.
So maybe it would help if I showed you the language that is in the capital bill as it left the House, since that's the easiest one to
Are
find.
these major?
And one of them was 108 Cherry Street.
Yeah, okay.
So I would say that was pretty major.
And so they can negotiate the sale as long as the terms outlined in the capital bill are met.
Right, and I mean, so this is Section 19 covers 3 properties, subsection A, so lines 5 to 11 is all that is included for 110 State Street. So fewer parameters.
Just an A, that's it.
Yeah.
That's just to the city.
No,
No, we give them first right of refusal.
First it says they can sell it, and then it just says the city gets the first right of refusal, that's it, really. There's no
And we
other
changed
condition.
some of that language in the Senate side of it to be more fair to the state in itself, to be sure that,
Watson Hall.
to be sure that we could get fair market value. Even though it says that they should get fair market value, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't, we wanted to make sure that even if the city wanted to buy it, that it wasn't at a discount, that it was for fair market value.
And a lot of that language is in 29 VSA section 166
Right.
in general.
But then why are you not standing?
That's the General Assembly approval of the sale.
Why are you notwithstanding it instead of just giving them the approval?
Otherwise.
There, it's authorizing them because it's supposed to be after the fact. It's phrased a little bit differently in your language, but it accomplishes the same goal.
We're not gonna give you approval, we're gonna notwithstand that you need the approval, that's how we're gonna give you the
Well,
approval.
sometimes-
It's done here.
Where, you know, it's not. They. And then say, but, you know, we gotta go back and get the approval of the General
Yeah, it's weird that
Assembly.
you would do that.
So this is why that notwithstanding is important.
That's exactly how Becky Wasserman, who does Capitol Bill work, describes it. Like just the timing of it, you know, you're a part-time legislature, it would just stall the
Maybe that
ability to
would,
sell.
so it had to be like a condition of the closing that the General Assembly approved the conditions of the.
Yeah, and then how long is it gonna take?
And it
Once you're
poses
back.
delay and uncertainty. What if somebody comes in and says, well, I oppose, you know?
Right.
So either,
And ultimately, it's affects value. I mean,
Yeah, it's gonna
if you listen to Bobby Starr, and not to pick on Bobby, I mean, I agree with him. He's, well, I can't say that I agree with him, 'cause I don't have enough history to know whether I agree with him or not, but I agree with his thought process, which is that the state has been always famous for buying high and selling low. And that's what Bobby has said, you know, several different times. And so I think this is to trust that they will do what's best for the state, get the biggest and best value. But in any real estate transaction, I can tell you what kills deals is time.
Yeah,
This makes me feel better because this is just authorization language, so that normalizes this to me, so.
but the fair market value is supposed to be there. So the question is, are we in fact not complying with the statute and selling something at less than fair market value?
well, Press said they added that.
I think we
I thought
were.
you said the underlying
We
statute.
were in there, we were going to change some language, but I think we were satisfied with what we saw, that it wasn't going to be a discounted sale to anybody, that it would be fair market value. We were happy, let me say it a different way, we're happy with the process that we saw.
There are times when, in fact, we might consciously do a discounted sale.
Right.
But I'm just fair market value, is that in the
To be
statute?
fair, we
But we're
would,
notwithstanding that statute.
So
Right, but
I'm less well equipped to talk about Title 19 and what happens in the Capitol bill. I was putting up it as a point of comparison. I think what would be more beneficial is, I've got so many tabs open. If you look at subsection D, this is what's applicable to the Caledonia Airport. It says, the agency shall not proceed with the sale or lease of the airport unless there's a fair market value offer as required under 19 VSA 10 KB or 26 AA. Let's look at those two. So 19 VSA section, that's the wrong one. Here we go. Oh. Sorry, I have too many tabs open. Okay, this is 19 VSA section 10K. This is the statement of policy for asset management for the sale of agency of transportation state property. And it talks about, in subsection B, the agency shall not negotiate nor offer for sale any state property for less than fair market value without the prior approval. So this is saying, we're not giving you the prior approval for it to be less than fair market value. For purposes of this, you need to comply with fair market value under 19 VSA section 10 KB. That's going to be for sale. And then for lease, it references 26A, and that says require the payment of fair market value rent. This is the closest I could find to a definition for fair market in Title 19, as determined by the prevailing area market prices for comparable space or property. So your subsection D, never going to get back to the tab that was open. Your subsection D is referencing those two statutes and say they cannot proceed with a sale or lease unless there's a fair market value offer.
As required.
And your comment about that there isn't a definition of fair market value in Title 19, does that matter? Because there are definitions in other titles.
So those would apply to other titles. I think if there was litigation around this, you would be looking to the tools of statutory interpretation to determine what is fair market value. You could look at the English dictionary definition, you could look at other titles, but I think probably where this is going to come more into play is in the process of selling the property in general and what the agency is going to do as its due diligence there. I think if you have more questions on the process, agency would be better suited.
Well, that was just a legal question about, does the definition in other titles have any impact on other titles? I assume they did, but you're kind of saying they don't.
I mean, it would be a tool of statutory interpretation. It would be a way that someone could argue, if there was ambiguity, how do you interpret this undefined?
So what they were gonna do down here on the 110 building is not only were they gonna do an appraisal process, but they were also gonna hire a real estate person who sold commercial space. Because I know that at some point in time, it isn't always what is, what an appraisal is. It's what sometimes what market value is,
Could be.
what somebody's willing to pay.
Yeah.
And so what made us feel good about it was that if you hired somebody who was licensed within the state to sell commercial real estate, that they would get the biggest and best, which is what their obligated fiduciary responsibility is, duty is. And so it wouldn't always just fall on what the appraised value is, but what somebody willing to pay, and what are they willing to pay and able to pay.
Yeah.
And so that's why we didn't dive into that. And as I've learned from a senior senator in this room, sometimes you stay away from prescriptive language to tell people how to do their job when you are confident that the protections are in place for them to do it.
And I would say that I think if you didn't include subsection D, they still would need to follow statute in 19 VSA section 10 KB and 26 AA. I think this is providing a level of comfort. You're referencing that in existing statute, there are already these requirements around fair market value, and you're putting it in the section so that it can be seen. Not only are you using fair market value in the language, but you're linking it back to statute, which is why I think it's a better approach than just sort of saying fair market value.
I think we've done enough for today and need to just await what happens with the public meetings.
Can I mention one more thing? Subsection E, just because we skipped over it. 5 VSA section 204, that's the piece that says that they can't sell it if it's over $500,000 without approval from the General Assembly. So this is you giving them approval again. So you're giving them approval in subsection B, but then subsection E, you're saying this approval meets the requirements of 5 VSA section 204, and that is consistent with what was done with the Boylan.
Can you bring up VSA 204, because I can't see it. And I agree, I'm feeling much better, thank you, this normalizes it to me. I was just, we don't want to move too quickly on saying go sell an airport.
So 204B is the pertinent part, an acquisition or transfer under the section of property or rights and property with an appraised or other estimated value of $500,000 or above. Shall be made with the specific prior approval of General Assembly of the acquisition or transfer and its terms. But it also says they can go to JTalk if you're not in session.
And that was I wonder if we updated the number in 2015 or if it's, we'd have to go, or 2011, we'd have to go back.
We'd have to go back and look. At least it's only like 3 acts that I would need to look at. So I can tell you what it was, what the number was in 1985. And I will say that 1985 is when I think Title V was recodified. So to the extent that it's something that was added in 1985, if it was added at 500,000, then that could have been a much older number. But yeah, I will send you the Boylan Act, and I will just tell you the history of that 500,000 if it's
You don't
changed
have
at all. I'm going to, because now I'm curious. My curiosity.
Oh, well, I can-
For our approvals.
Locates their airport in South Dakota, South Dakota, don't have anything to say about it. I don't know whose fault that was.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there's- Someone was on a council there.
Right, the council is asleep.
Well, So, are we,
Favorite topic.
are we at all set,
Yes, go ahead. Go to work.
in terms of where we are with the amendment? It seems to have incorporated